I'm next going to call on Cheryl. Cheryl Carolus is well-known South African. In recent years, in particular, I suppose many will associate her with really amazing things that she has done in corporate, on the boards of many, many companies where she does fantastic work, including a completely woman-owned company that demonstrates that democratizing the corporate space doesn't have to be unprofitable, 2/3 of those profits being plowed back into communities. But of course, she has an illustrious career as well as a South African in the anti-apartheid struggle, has been an amazing part of our liberation movement, and in the transition to democracy with negotiating a negotiated settlement including our constitution, working closely with Madiba, and was also our High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. But for some reason, whenever I hear your name, the first thing I actually think of, Cheryl, is dancing away at the Arts Festival in Grahamstown at the long table. She loves giving me a good time as much as she's a very hardworking person. And also the arts is something that she's very passionate about. Can we please welcome Cheryl into this space?
Thank you very much, Eusebius. If I have time later, I will also say the kinds of things about how I remember you. And in fact, a number of the people at the table. But we won't go there. Yes, Pumi Mteto, I would laugh if I cackled nervously if I would. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I must say, when I was given this question, I was also a bit thrown by it, but it's not an unusual question. We often get asked in various forms. And I want to say, I know some goddamn awful women. There are some dreadful women out there who do the most awful things, and we've seen some of them out and about over the last few days after those 4 women stood around the place. But I must say that for every one of those goddamn awful women I know, there are probably at least 100 far worse men that I know who do 500 times worse things than those women do. I think that it is true that we should notice it more when women are more awful to other women. I expect better of women. Because if you have walked a journey and you have the scars on your back, I expect you to not see one other human being, male or female, having to go through that same pain that you did. And that is why it possibly is more noticeable. But I am a product of women having, and when I think of it, I always think of women having held me like this. My grandmother, my mother, my godmother, my neighbors, female teacher. Everything I am today, I cannot think of how women have not played a role in it. Whether it was as a cheeky young girl child who had a lot of attitude about the fact that I was never going to accept that 2 simple biological facts could in fact be used to just tell me to accept that I am not entitled to everything that my society has to offer. And that was the color with which I happened to be born, one biological fact, and the other one, the sex with which I was born, and that is to be a girl. And so throughout that, my grandmother was a really good example. And I used to spend a lot of my time watching my grandmother, which is why today I actually like being officially an older person. Yes, I am an older person. I love being older because my grandmother, she's late now, but she was just strong, she was confident, she was very outspoken, my one grandmother. My mother was very different. Very quiet, also strong, and just hugely supportive and encouraging of me. I grew up with 4 sisters, and I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had grown up with brothers. And so I grew up with a family who really made me believe that the things that stood between me and what I wanted to be was me and myself. Obviously, there was modification. It's a dreadful world out there. But you need to also see, when there's a dreadful world out there, you need to ask yourself not only where I want to go, that's where I want to be in my life. Like when I decided I wanted to be free, I didn't blame other people. I knew that they were responsible for it. I certainly wasn't going to assume responsibility for my bad situation. But the question I asked myself was, so what am I going to do? And it's still something I have in my life, is that when I don't like something, like now, I must say to you, I love voting, and I hope every one of you who are of voting age did go and vote, because I'll be very cross if you didn't. I, quite frankly, don't care who you voted for, but you go out there and you vote. And I must say I'm very disappointed that they put this ink on your finger, because if I had a chance to go and vote 20 times, every time I could vote, I would be so out there to go and vote. But I think it's quite an important thing to actually just ask ourselves sometimes, what is it that stands between us and where we want to be or where we do not want to be? And that's why it's important for us to remember what Women's Day is about. Women's Day is actually about 20,000 women who went to the union buildings against a lot of odds. I must also say to you up front, I know everyone says your vote is your secret. I want you to know that notwithstanding all the rude things I've said about some people and some behaviors in the ANC, I voted for the ANC. But I want to say that even the men in the ANC were the strongest, because the strongest mobilizers for that was, in fact, the ANC women. But the men felt, nah, the women shouldn't do this. And you know why? Because they thought the women would just not be able to pull this off, and it was going to bring the organization into disrepute. So they actually told the women they shouldn't go ahead with the march, while the women went ahead with the march. And when they got to the union buildings, 20,000 of them, babies strapped to their backs, they stood there for 1 minute silence, and that poignant story was how the only noise was this boy child who cried. All the girl children apparently must have been silent, you say. Because you know how you men can just spoil a good moment. And when the women were supposed to march up, they went with their petitions. Strydom also obviously thought, was the Prime Minister at the time, he also obviously thought this thing was not going to work. No, bunch of women being arrested and harassed on the trains and being arrested, they were never going to make a success of it. Well, 20,000 of the women, which was a hell of a lot of women in those days, poor women mostly, made it to the union buildings. And then what did Strydom do? Again, what you guys do, when the going gets tough. He ran away. So when the women went there, Strydom was, boom, missing. Well, a month later, Strydom was dead. And there, I think, is where the song comes from, Now, I hope some of you are going to join me. My husband is sitting somewhere at the back. He claims I can't sing well. That's his opinion. I have a different one. And when the women sang, Wena Strydom, Watinta Bafazi, Watinti Mbokodo, Usakufa. And says, Strydom, you have touched the women, you've dislodged the boulder, you will be crushed. Well, there he was a month later, after not taking the women seriously enough, no respect, dead, right? So, but again, maybe what we must say, the men didn't believe, the men in the ANC didn't believe the women could pull it off. Strydom didn't believe he could pull it off. But when you look at those 4 women and why they're so important in what they symbolize, there was actually a huge amount of solidarity amongst the women that made that march happen. And I think it's important for us to remember, because there's a hell of a lot of bad things that are going on today. But I want to say I am proud of the freedom struggle that has brought me and shaped me. My strength today is because of other women and men, but very strong women who have nurtured me, held my feet to the fire, taught me the basic things in life, and gave me the opportunities to be a leader in the liberation movement and in my society. Eusebia spoke about the company that I am part of. We are 4 women. We are not your average retiring violets, I don't think. It's myself and Tandior Lane, who was the first CCMA commissioner, Wendy Lucas Bull, who in fact was the first woman to head up a bank in South Africa and is now the chair of ABSA. Dolly Mogatle was the first woman on the executive of Eskom. So we were all women who'd done the first of the first of the first whatever, and so on. And when we formed Peotona, some people, including one husband, not mine, he would know of better than this, but some of my best friends are men, I married one. But some people said, this thing is never going to survive. The four of you forming one company, it's going to end up in tears. Why? I'm outraged because there were two reasons that they put forth. The first one was, four women couldn't possibly work together, let alone four strong alpha females. Well, this year, on the 3rd of August, we celebrated our 11th birthday anniversary. And you know what? We actually love one another more, the solidarity, just the fact that you're dealing with peers. You're not dealing with some stupid man in the same exco team as you, who always thinks that he should be the first person to speak or stand up or do something to patronize us. No. We've proven that you can actually work together for 11 years, be thoughtful, be tough with each other. But I've never felt so safe in a team of power, such as what I do with these four sisters of mine. When our families are ill, when our children succeed, when we check out the partners they're going to marry or not, or when we have views on them, we are so tight and we are so supportive of each other. The second reason why people said Peotona wouldn't succeed was because we decided that 2/3, so every 1 rand we make, 66 cents we put right back into the communities where we make our money. They said that's never going to work for a couple of reasons. How can you make money? Well, do I look as if I'm starving? I do not think so, right? So we are still making good money by putting back 2/3 of what we do. And so one of the other things which we do is we actually started a mentorship network for women. We all mentor women and men, but we decided to bring together the women whom we mentor. Why? Not because they're bad at working together, but because they're shocking at networking or putting themselves forward. And so we bring those women together to meet each other, and they're all very successful, highly accomplished women, entirely deserving of what they have achieved in life already. We typically work with women who qualified as professionals already. In our family, we work with younger people than that. But we do what an amazing California woman sitting here in front of me, one of my favorite women, Maisha Jenkins, who's a poet. Maisha brings together young women who she exposes in the orbit one Tuesday night a month. Is this a good ad or what, Maisha? But Maisha does what we do in the corporate world. And that is, as a successful person in your own profession and your own life space, you pass on the baton, but you also pass on the values to the next generation of women. We pass on to them the values of being strong, and that strength is not about trying to emulate men. We pass on to them the baton that strength is always about understanding where you come from and that you know where you're going to. We pass on to them a baton of strong sense of self and responsibility to yourself, your family, your community, your country, and in fact the world, and especially now in difficult times. And so I just want to say that my entire life, right up to how I'm living it now and how I'm loving it now. And maybe I'll conclude, Eusebius, by just saying, you know what? I think as we sometimes, when we think of where we're at with women's position, this country is street years ahead of most international countries, of most mature countries. And a lot of that has been brought through the liberation movement, through the ANC, through women working together, but not only by the ANC. And this is why, with a hot contestation in politics today, I want to remind all of us, regardless of what our political parties are and what we vote for. In 1994, in the run-up, we as women came together. ANC women, National Party women, what was the DA at the time? Whatever, all the women across the parties. We came together and we said, we formed the Women's National Coalition. And we said, what is the minimum we want in this constitution? And we called all our male leaders to the ANC to come and listen to us and to say, okay, these are the things that matter to us. Obviously, it's about equality before the law. It's about our right to our sexual orientation. It's about the right to our bodies and all of that. But it was also simple things like maintenance and the indignity that women have to go through when badass men walk out on women and run off with something in a miniskirt. That they don't refuse to pay what they should towards keeping their children to be able to grow up properly. And we united as women, and we discovered there was far more that actually united us than what divided us, including which parties we make our crosses to. There's a long journey ahead, and my appeal to all the women and the men in here, let us just remember what are the things that we still haven't won. And there's far more that unites us than divides us. And now that we are doing coalitions and all of this sort of stuff, somebody sent me a tweet this morning to say, everybody's in coalitions now. Just remember that coalitions is like German sausage. You don't want to know what went into it, and you don't want to understand what makes it up. But even when that happens, what is absolutely clear is that the position of women is in fact shocking in this country, and that there's far more that should unite us. And perhaps when people are doing their coalition politics, maybe we should actually think at the local government level, at the local school level, what are the things that we think women need from these people who are doing their coalitions, and summon them to come and speak to us. So I want to say to you, what Tinta Bafazi, what Tintimbokoto. Let's remind them about that. Thank you, you say this.